I'm Maggie. I'm the product manager for text here at One Signal. And then, Andrea, do you want to introduce yourself quickly as well?
Yes, thank you, Maggie. My name is Andrea Martin. I'm a senior product manager at Ualett, and we are in the fintech space helping the gig economy um, fund their day-to-day life when they don't have funds to do so.
Cool. Thanks so much for joining us. Okay, so yeah, we're going to be talking about RCS today, navigating that shift from SMS to RCS. And we have a fun little theme, Back to the Future, where Marty McFly travels to see what's coming next. So we're doing something similar for messaging, so we thought that would be a fun theme. So setting some context. Spam has riddled the text messaging world, and because of that, we're seeing mobile app usage decline, and marketers concerned are concerned about what messages get seen, how to cut through the noise. And so we'll be talking about RCS's role in that today. But before we dive in, let's do a fun icebreaker question. I'm going to ask this to the group, and feel free to put it in the chat. Um, since today's conversation is about messaging, what's the fastest way for a company to get you to ignore their message? Feel free to put something in the chat. But Andrew, what's your answer?
I was just putting in the chat too. I have like 1,300 unread messages in my text bank right now, which would make some people cringe. I would say that a majority of those are anyone who's sending me a text or an offer that doesn't identify themselves. Like if I don't know who it's coming from, I'm not reading it.
Totally fair. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. I also have what's left. I also have over 1,000 messages in my text messages as well. It can be very overwhelming, and if there's an unrecognized number, I'm definitely not likely to respond to that. So that I agree with that. Um, okay. Well, thank you again for joining. Let's go ahead and just dive in. So we know, like, as we talked about, trust is kind of the new deliverability. It gives you that recognition and that credibility. Maybe historically, teams have like optimized for more reach and volume and deliverability, but now they want to optimize more for trust, trying to cut through that 1,000 plus messaging inbox. In fintech, trust is really important. OTP, fraud alert messages, they can look really similar to scam text. So, tell us a little bit more about your interest in RCS and how you're thinking about that problem.
Yeah, so like I said, one of my main concerns is unidentified messages. RCS allowed us the opportunity to have brand recognition from the start. So as soon as you see a message from Wallet hit your inbox, you know who that message is from and you can identify the sender immediately, which again was just huge for us. We're a fintech, so we have a lot of competitors in this space, and we send a lot of messages, including OTP and different marketing campaigns, but also like reminders to our community about making remittances or fraud alerts or anything that could be classified in a financial services space. If you're sending those from an unidentified number or from a number that isn't recognizable, it can always come across as fraudulent just because that is a huge issue right now in the space. And a lot of people are using that criteria in order to prey on people.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned a lot of different use cases. Where did you start? What was the first case you thought that RCS might be like a better customer experience than SMS? Did you kind of have a priority there of which campaign to start with?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people looking into RCS and seeing what it can do, marketing is the big glaring open box where you could send a lot of messages. I think it makes the most sense because you can attach a picture, you can have a call to action. And so I think marketing is the natural lane that people would maybe go down to introduce RCS.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense too, because on the marketing side, like that's maybe people are even more likely to think it's spam when it's like purely promotional rather than transactional and they don't really understand the context as much. And so maybe that branded sender would like really help in that particular use case as well. So that makes a lot of sense. Um, Also, just an aside for all of our participants, feel free to drop questions along the way into the chat, and we'll answer them. We'll have some time at the end to answer some of the questions. So yeah, drop some questions in the chat. Um, Okay, so yeah, customers though, they don't really think just in channels like, yeah, we are thinking about RCS and SMS, but they're mostly thinking about like the entire experience, not just the text message, right moment across all the different channels. So how did you see RCS fitting within your broader messaging stack? Where did you think that like that customer interaction of RCS most fit into that entire flow?
Yeah. Well, like I said, we're a fintech, so our slogan is built on trust, and that's a big part of what we're trying to do. So, getting a message from a carrier that you have confirmed is the person that's you're expecting to receive a message from, or you're immediately recognizable from your branding perspective, is something that was really important to us. Um, we also then transitioned into the transactional communications as well. And so not just the marketing side, but also the transactional ones, because we felt like if we're going to be branded from the marketing side, we should also be branded from the transactional side.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Was there like, and in that transactional and promotional, are you thinking about other channels too? How are you doing kind of like, are you doing any email follow-up or push notification follow-up? Do you have kind of a multi-channel setup?
Yeah, we do. So we do omni-channel, we do push, push notifications, SMS, RCS now, and then also email. So we utilize all channels across the board. And then we also have like follow-up messages when someone does a transaction, when someone completes an action on our app, we'll send a follow-up. Those are sometimes transactional, and then those also can sometimes kick off a marketing. And so that could be one of many different types of communication that our clients would receive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are you ever like orchestrating across? And when do you think about like now is the time that I should be sending the RCS versus the time when you're sending an email or sending a push notification? How do you think about like which of the channels to utilize?
It's all kind of on what the content of the message could be. So RCS obviously gives you the option. I'm sure you'll dive in a few minutes and show everyone that you can now add call to actions into that message. And so it can be very structured like an email. So there are previous emails that we're thinking about transitioning over to an RCS rich media message sending to our clients because they have multiple call to actions in the message that we can get our clients to engage with. And so we're actually thinking internally about how we can transition a lot of those emails or even push notifications into an RCS and have more call to actions available to our clients instead of just like a single one that an in-app would allow you to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, there's that call to action, and then how does that hand off? Does it just hand off directly into the app, or are you pushing them into a web experience? What's kind of the end-to-end flow there for the RCS?
The nice thing about RCS is that we can actually do both. So we push them to our app through a deep link into specific screens within our app. Or what we could also do is drop them into a landing page where we're giving them a call to action, which could also lead you to our app experience. Or it could just be giving them more information about their account with us and more options that they could do on that landing page. So because we have the option to add those CTAs, we now have the option to push them multiple places as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, we'll get into some of the like how you do that. So, but it's great to hear that that's like adding value, that like that kind of rich experience is part of the driver for RCS. Some of the big questions we get in RCS though is like, how do you get approved? What is the onboarding process? Is it ready? Is this technology ready? Um, and it's definitely complicated. It's something you have to fully think through. There's a whole ecosystem behind RCS that One Signal helps to manage. So I'm curious about how you guys approach that. What was your like initial motivation and then eventual like how did you get started into getting into RCS?
The internal motivation was pushed from our marketing side for sure. They're wanting to have that brand recognition from the start with our clients. And so they kind of brought it to product and talked about how we could implement this internally. Everyone agreed that it was a better experience for our brand to be recognizable in that way. And so it wasn't that tough of a sell, but the process is long. And so I think it's getting shorter as more and more clients and companies are trying to go this route. But it was a involved process from everyone internally. We had to do some updates on our side, policies and terms, making sure that people, rightfully so, are aware that they could be receiving these messages and agreeing to receiving some of these heavier carrier messages. We had a few different changes to make internally, like I said, and then we had to get approved with all the carriers. And so that process takes a little bit. There's a lot of back and forth with One Signal, who helped us through the process the entire time. So we didn't necessarily have to do all of it, but I do know that there was a few weeks of back and forth, maybe even like a month or two of back and forth on answering questions, proving that we're doing all the right things, following all the processes that they lay out for us in order to be approved with the carriers to send.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything you wish someone had told you before you started the approvals process?
Um, I mean, I think that One Signal did a really great job of prepping us in order to get ready to go through this process. But I do think that there was more tech engagement than we ever realized. Just updating some of those policies, those terms, making sure that it explicitly says that we will be using RCS in some of our communications so that clients are aware of that change, was one of the bigger ones. And just because it involved a different path through our organization, which was through the tech space to make sure that all of those things were updated.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for every RCS approval, you have to get the terms of service and the privacy policy, similar to some of the other applications. But and with RCS compliance, some of those are a little bit harsher and looking through those and making sure they're fully compliant. So that makes sense. It's helpful, yeah, to like prepare yourself for that application process, knowing that you might have to do that, prepare for some of that going forward into the application. Okay, cool. That was super helpful. Anything else you want to share about some of the like campaigns that you're building, how you thought about like what features excited you most and which campaigns you were most excited to use RCS for?
Yeah, absolutely. We just went through a pretty intense forecasting in order to do contracting on RCS and what we're actually going to be using it for. And so we went through the process of talking about what channels we're communicating through now and what we could potentially turn into an RCS message or an RCS rich media message because they're different. We identified, I think, 20 to 30 different messages that we would internally consider into turning into a new message type, and then what those like call to actions we could include. So right now in an SMS, you're just getting an SMS with maybe a deep link and then it takes you somewhere. Because we have the option to have multiple CTAs on a message, we've decided to turn some of our like servicing or people who support our clients every single day into messages that can maybe be a little bit more self-service. And so they don't necessarily have to reach out to someone, but they have that option. So now we can deep link into like our app and it can say, take you to this one page where we're trying to engage you into doing an action, or take you to a landing page where we explain a little bit more about that. Or the third one could be contact us if that's what you need to do. So instead of having people only pointed towards one of those three options, we can now also on that message give them the option to contact us directly and get help if they need it or solve the problem on their own through one of those deep links that we've identified. So there was, like I said, 20 to 30 different messages that we internally had identified in turning into some of the new messaging types and what those would look like. It's been really fun to explore. We're kind of in the beginning stages of that into what picture would we use, what CTAs would we use, what deep links would we need in order to support those messages, and kind of walking through that process right now internally.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And like, previously with SMS, you didn't get a bunch of those like additional complexities of things to think about because you just didn't have that kind of like rich message. So it's good that you guys have like identified which messages that you're most interested in kind of upgrading to the new RCS experience. And now you get to kind of explore like all the rich ways that those messages can be sent out. And like it sounds like kind of the most important piece to you guys is that call to action and like the fact that you could kind of drive someone directly into the app or the web experience that you're looking for them to go to.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so what I'd love to do next is do a quick demo of what it's like to build an RCS message in one signal and kind of share some of those. How do you build that call to action and what are some of the rich possibilities with RCS?
Yeah.
Um, and then Andrea, would love to like have you walk us through kind of like how you're using it as well. So I'm gonna share my screen here. See if I can find the right one. All right, give me a second. Okay. Yeah, so we recently launched some improvements to the RCS editor. And here I'm in SMS RCS over here, and I'm creating a new message. And here's where you would enter in your name, add an audience, um, and specifically target whoever your audience is. And then here you'll see we've got the RCS senders, and we've also got our SMS senders in here. And so we kind of just show you which ones, like what stage that they're in. Right now we have a demo environment, so we have a test one. But once you select an RCS sender, you can kind of see our editor here. And here you have the option of a text only RCS, a card RCS, or a carousel. So in that carousel, you can have multiple cards and kind of swipe through them all. So, Andrea, how have you used this so far? What have you built with our new editor?
So we haven't navigated into the carousel yet, but we have been doing a lot of cards and we've been doing some tall view cards and then some half view cards. And so we also have done mostly open in a new browser, but we'll start with like a card image created internally from one of our graphic designers, or I mean, sometimes AI, we will grab like a cityscape or something, and then we'll throw a title on there, which is like an engaging message to get someone to interact with the message. So those are kind of the first things when someone's requesting from one of our departments what message they want to send. What we do is kind of say like all of these different open criterias and then what they want to send in order for us to be able to take it and turn it into a message. So um start with the title, go through the message and say like some sort of engaging message, and then we'll add our CTAs after that.
Okay, I'll walk us through like trying to do that. So maybe you kind of set up your title here, interact with me. This is my really engaging message. Maybe you mentioned like, let's pull in a cityscape. And I live in New York City, so maybe I'll do New York City. And you guys have a great design team to do some of this. Let's see. Can I pull in an image? All right. Let me pull in an image that I have on my desktop here. Let's see if I have one. Okay. Maybe I'll put in our One Signal logo here to try to make it more engaging. And then you mentioned you might put in like a link here. You've been trying tall view. And so that
Mhm.
kind of like opens it up in this way. Half view opens up halfway. And you've also been exploring like what it looks like in new browser tab.
Yeah.
What kind of motivates you between these three different ones? Is it just to like see A/B test or what have you been, what's the logic there?
Yeah, a little bit of testing and then also a little bit of seeing what converts, but then also the message content too obviously drives a lot of what we're doing. If we're trying to drive to our app, we'll open in a new browser tab, but if we're trying to engage someone in like a marketing campaign, we could do a tall message view or even a full message view so that they can see what our new offer is and then be able to actually interact with it in the view there versus sending them elsewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then how do you think about the fallback content here?
So, from what I understand, I don't want to say anything incorrect, but from what I understand, the fallback is like if someone doesn't have um, cell service or something. So we try to keep the message as consistent as we can from the actual um, message from above down to the fallback. So we would choose on our side the most um, engaging CTA that we had, or the one that we want the client to choose, and put that down in the message below, and then part of the engaging message as well. And so if there's like two CTAs that are competing and we really want both of them, what we would do is internally decide where we want to push people the most and then include that, or duke it out. No, I'm just kidding. I We really have to like come to terms with what we want them to do in the message, and then whatever the call to action is would just contribute to that message as well.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And then I'm also curious, how big of a concern is like the cost of the message to you guys?
Um, we do a lot of forecasting internally, and in order to even do some of our cost analysis for RCS, we went through a very laborious forecast of where we are today, where we're going to be in the future, and then playing into like our LTV, our CAC numbers, all of those numbers that play into like what we're spending on each client. Uh, It's a huge factor for us, but we also want to see the return as well. And so while we're testing it out, we're kind of having the ability to play with it and test out messages and see what the return is. But I mean, I don't want to say it's none. I don't want to say that we're not concerned about the cost. We definitely are, but we're really trying to see what the ROI is right now too. So we're trying to get as many messages out and engaged with as we can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, and RCS costing is also pretty complex because of all of the new like types, the rich media versus single. How much do you guys use this cost guide down here?
A lot. So when it changes over from rich media back to like just rich, we can go into our forecast then and we can go against the numbers that we've laid out monthly or annually and determine like what is this going to play into our forecast, and are we going over, or are we staying within the cost that we had generally assumed when we did our forecast. So when it switches from rich to rich media, obviously there's a cost increase with that. And so we'll determine internally if we're able to take away some of the elements that we added in order to get it to rich media to bring it down to rich, or if we want to maybe sway that message a little bit less into just a rich message. We play around with it a lot in order to be able to determine like what makes sense for the message and what makes sense for the cost.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, given that texting is such a price sensitive channel, that makes a lot of sense, especially on the ROI side. Um, I know you recently launched a campaign with RCS. Tell me more about it. What was the campaign? What'd you build?
So we built our servicing teams helps clients across the country engage with our app and come back into our app and do any sort of action that we're asking for them to do, whether that's to pay on their cash advance or get them to contact our servicing team to see if we can help clients um, pay on their advance, or we call it remit. What we did is we launched a campaign that was engagement over the weekend. And so we were trying to engage our clients over the weekend when we knew that gig workers are working the most, doing drivers, deliveries, and seeing if we could help them what we internally classify as getting back on track with their advance. So that's back into good standing, or to give us a call and we would help them. What we did is set up a message talking about the weekend income, talking about us wanting to help get them back on track, giving us a call. So we had, I believe, 3 call to actions, and then we launched that on a Friday. And we've seen a huge return over this last week, even post 24 hours from sending that message, of people calling us, engaging with that message and trying to get their account back into good standing with us. So we were targeting a very specific group of users on our platform, and we had really good results. I think we had 40% open rate. And then I think, like you had said, Maggie, that not everyone even has their read receipts on, so that number could even be low. But from what we've seen from some of our SMS campaigns, that's pretty high.
Yeah. And then on the conversion side, how is the conversion doing to actually get them to doing the final result that you wanted them to do with that message?
Good. I was actually pulling it before this call, and we've had a lot of people engage with that message and then in turn go into our app and actually do the action that we were posting in the message. So we were asking them to add a debit card into their account and then make a remittance. Um, from what I've seen, we did make a couple changes on our side as well, allowing this to happen, but we've seen more weekend activity than we ever have in the past.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you think it's which part do you think attributes to it more? Is it the fact that it came from that branded center, or do you think it's that call to action that drives that?
That's a good question. I think we probably have to play with it a little bit more, especially some of the OTP messages that we send, transactional communications. I would love to say that it's like the content of the message is just better than it's ever been. We're really getting people engaged with our messaging and our pictures that we're posting. But part of me probably would attribute it to the brand messaging too, just because that's a big one for me, and making sure that people know who the message is coming from, just since that's such a big factor in when I respond to messages or when I engage with a message. So I have to assume that that's part of it as well.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'll pause there because I see we have a bunch of questions coming in and I know that people have to leave. So, I wanted to answer some questions here. Okay, so that first question is, can we send RCS messages globally? Yes, so the answer is yes, but you do have to register an RCS sender per country. And Remind me, Andrew, you guys are registered in the US.
Hmm.
Sending in the US. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So with every RCS agent, you pretty much register per country. You can try to register for multiple countries. They're kind of changing the rules about that, but you can send them globally. Right now, the best practice is to register your sender per country, though. Yeah. And how have you guys thought about that? Do you guys have customers abroad, or are you mostly just US focused?
So we don't have customers abroad, but we are launching additional products that could be international, or we could communicate with people internationally. And so that is something that we will have to explore in the coming probably months, weeks, if not year, how to message with people globally just to make sure that they're able to receive communications that we need to get to them.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, next question here. Even with the vast saturation of RCS devices, how do you recommend best tailoring messages that hits the fallback if the RCS contain a carousel? Yeah, so Andrew, we had kind of talked a little bit about this with your fallback. Are you mostly focusing on shortening it? You kind of mentioned shorten and the most engaging thing. Is that the
Mhm.
main things that you're trying to do there with the fallback?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Um, yeah, and the carousel contains a lot more information, probably again, just kind of like shortening it. Something that we do in the product is we'll automatically generate a fallback for you, and we'll put that in the text there. So based on the content that you've created with the card or the carousel, we might assume something for the SMS fallback, but then you can go ahead and change up, shorten it, change it, specify the specific custom SMS fallback that you want to send. Um, and it sounds like Andrew, you guys are definitely doing that and trying to like make sure that your message is as concise for the SMS rules instead. Okay, so next question is how can I set up RCS? Yeah, so we kind of talked about this. There's like the terms of service, the privacy policy that you have to go through. And luckily one we have some compliance experts at OneSignal help you get set up and make sure that you've got your opt-ins as compliant as possible. But essentially that's the process. You work with OneSignal and then we'll help you go through the implementation process. And it's just about getting your opt-ins, you also have to upload a logo, your website, some support information, a contact us phone number, a contact us email, and then yeah, the logo, a banner, and we'll get those to all of the approving parties. So that'll be us as well as Google, and then we work with some downstream providers that also will approve those campaigns and make sure that you can actually send that campaign. And it's a compliance check as well as collecting all of the information to help you build that branded sender. I think also there's like a brand color as well that we ask for. Um, okay, question here. Have you seen any difference in opt-out rates between RCS and SMS for marketing content? Yeah, that's a great question. I'm curious, Andrea, how much are you guys looking at that opt-out rate? How important is that for you guys?
The opt-out rate is huge, but we also registered our transactional messages through OneSignal as well. And so, um, not to say that we're less focused on it, but we haven't seen a huge opt-out rate between RCS and SMS, and maybe it would even sway less opt-out with RCS, but we haven't been able to test that yet just because it's so new. Um, I don't I don't know if I have a great answer. I just think that we haven't seen a drastic fallout from RCS yet for
Yeah.
marketing.
And that makes sense. I mean, you guys are kind of set up in the best way where you're separate. I think the thing that really drives opt-outs is like when you're mixing use cases, when you put transactional messages and promotional messages all with the same sender, and then you're kind of mixing that opt-out where when they opt out from a marketing use case, they're also opting out from transactional. So you guys are set up in kind of the more optimal best practice way where you're truly like separating those opt-outs um, from between transactional and marketing. And so I think that probably is the big driver of what causes like opt-outs, but so I think that's probably doing okay because of that. But yeah, still remaining to be seen, I guess, on opt-outs. Um, and we do have some features coming to help you kind of analyze those opt-outs in OneSignal. So hopefully we'll get that out too. Um, Okay, with Apple finally integrating RCS, how do you foresee this changing the landscape for cross-platform marketing campaigns over the next year? Yeah, I mean, how much was the fact that Apple now supports RCS? Because actually, I don't know if you knew this, Andrea, but like RCS has been around for a very long time before, but it was always only supported on Android. And so only more recently did Apple support RCS. How much of that was a driver for you guys to even consider RCS?
I think it was a factor. I don't think it was the main driver. I don't think it was even maybe the second main driver, but the fact that we can, more than half of our clients are Apple users. And so the fact that Apple now allows RCS is huge. The CTAs look a little bit different on Apple than they do on Android. I'm hoping that that changes in the future. But the fact that we can now interact via RCS with Apple, if we couldn't, I mean, it probably would have been a showstopper, but the fact that it definitely wasn't like the driving factor, but it could have been a showstopper at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, any good channel, like you have to have that reach. And if like, especially in the US where so many of us, I mean, I have an iPhone myself. I think it's like if you can't reach your customers, then that channel kind of loses a lot of its value. So that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense on the showstopper side. Um, on the Android versus iOS differences, yeah, you mentioned that the buttons kind of show up differently. Um, Is that, I just wanted to share actually, going back to the product here. We do have this this previewer here. How much do you guys use that to like see the difference between iOS versus Android?
All the time. Like that is what we're checking the message constantly to make sure that it looks the way that we want. And then, like I said, we'll organize our CTAs based on the main call to action that we want the client to take within the first CTA, the second CTA, or the contact us CTA. We're playing around with the previewer all the time to make sure that it's perfect. We'll send test text messages or RCS messages as well. But the difference between the two, like they just show up a little bit better on Android. The CTAs look a little bit nicer. So we really have to be cognizant of that when we're playing around with the Apple viewer.
Yeah. Do you guys have like multiple devices that you guys are testing with that act to actually receive it, or are you mostly relying on the previewer here?
Um, We do have access to both Android and iOS. So our CRO gets some of those test RCS messages and we ask him like how does it look? How does it feel? But because we know that Android looks and feels a little bit more native to the messaging service and like experience, we're mainly testing the iOS to make sure that it's consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, one thing to call out here is one big way that Android and iOS are different is when you have two CTAs here, Apple will automatically kind of have this options instead and consolidate them into a single CTA, whereas Android will allow you to have two buttons and it'll show the two buttons on the message itself. So that's one kind of finding we had. We did have this actually like a community file on Figma that we mocked out a bunch of what this could look like and have we have some designs there so that if you guys have product design teams that are trying to design an RCS experience, they have like some a template to start with so they don't have to design everything from scratch. So just a quick plug for potentially a helpful resource there. Um, okay, next question here. For a toll-free number with far lesser time frame to acquire and get approved than RCS, is there any negative to start messaging and building your list with SMS while all RCS goes through the current 2 to 3 month approval uplift? Oh yeah, how did you guys start? Did you guys start with a different SMS number and what was that?
I believe we did, but we tried to stay consistent number to number. So I know that we use like a toll-free number to send RCS messages through. So we've been sending RCS messages for years and we do have our like client list built up and then we just converted those over into RCS. But I believe we're using the same number structure, if not the same numbers from our SMS to our RCS switch over.
Yeah, yeah. I believe you guys did keep that toll-free number consistent, and so the fallback will still use your previous SMS number that you were using. And so that just keeps that same consistent experience throughout for users. But Matthew, I think that's a great question, and I think that makes a lot of sense that you could start building out your list with SMS first and start engaging with SMS, and then while you're waiting for your RCS sender to get approved. I will say the timelines are getting shorter and shorter as the like industry figures out the best practices and like solidifies the process. I think it's becoming at least the process is more clear, and so people are getting approved a little bit faster. But I think that's a great idea. The one thing to consider is just the experience. The toll-free number will come from a different number, like your SMS sender will come from a toll-free number or a 10DLC, whatever you decide, whereas the RCS will come from that branded sender. And so there will be like a slight shift there in who the sender is. And so that would be the only disruption to the experience that you would probably need to consider as you're building out or thinking about your text messaging. Um, okay, Michaela's asking, what specific engagement metrics have you seen improve the most when brands transition from traditional SMS to RCS? So you mentioned kind of there's that read rate and then the conversions as well through. but
Yes.
yeah.
I think we answered this after her message was sent, but we definitely saw that our weekend campaign had a higher read
Yeah.
rate than most of our SMS campaigns previously. And then that is the first message I believe that we sent with like the logo and the brand recognition. And so I believe there were maybe multiple contributing factors as well as like the picture, the image, the CTA. But we've had a higher conversion rate and higher app activity over the weekend than we've ever seen in the past. And this was one of our first campaigns that we launched like over a weekend to get people back into the app over like a set period of time.
Yeah. And how do you think that's going to kind of, you previously mentioned, the next question I'm seeing here is like, how do we budget for the increased message costs? And you kind of mentioned some of the like ROI analysis that you guys are currently doing. How does your current campaign sort of impact and influence the way that you think about ROI and then kind of budget and plan out how much to invest in the RCS channel?
Yeah, so when we do our forecast with One Signal specifically, we had like a monthly allotment. And so we went through that forecasting process of saying like what in-app, what SMS are we going to turn over into RCS? And so we're kind of all going off of the budget that we put together and working against that and then just seeing what the ROI is to determine like if that would need to change in the future or not. And so our budget was kind of determinant on like what agreement we could come to with One Signal and then how we would continue to switch over SMS. So we would take away from our SMS monthly budget and turn that into RCS budget, take away from like some in-app and change it over into the RCS budget. So it was a little bit of like give and take, but I think it all worked out in the end. And it is a little bit of a cost increase for us. But like I said, we think that the ROI that we've already seen from it will have a greater impact than what an SMS previously had.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, okay, and so I'm seeing some similar questions about Android versus iOS. This is a great one from Molly. How do you balance your strategy between social, email, RCS, and yeah, kind of balancing that multi-channel? You mentioned you were doing a little bit of that analysis of like, now we're going to use these campaigns with RCS because there's a clear call to action. But how are you thinking about that balance now?
That's a great question. And I think internally we've had a lot of meetings and a lot of conversations on how we could um really prove out the ROI on this and then um what we would do in order to keep that engagement. And so, like, if we could start a campaign where we're engaging someone with an RCS message and then follow up with an email, and then maybe like our social channels also support that message, or starting with social and then having our RCS campaign work with that social campaign that we're pushing out. Um, we've seen an increase in engagement. But I'll be honest, we have done most of our RCS messages so far on the back end side with our clients who are already engaged with us than we have on the social channels. That's something that we have to move into. It's only been a couple months since we've been approved. And so we're trying to weigh all of those and get our strategy completely flushed out. But um, that's a great question, Molly. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out for us because I think that the omni-channel experience will be really interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's still new, so you're kind of just like proving out, is this like you're still sending those early messages and figuring out what that balance is. And we're starting to see good signs, it sounds like. And so remaining to be seen. I think probably that first message was enough to at least consider, okay, now what are all the other messages we want to consider, given that the conversion was really strong on that weekend campaign. So that just kind of builds that confidence of like, okay, let's convert more messages to RCS given that they're giving a higher conversion and invest
Absolutely.
more in the channel. Um, okay, so Matthew's saying we're just now building out our RCS program. What are you seeing for current timeframes on average? I will say this, I did say it's getting faster, but I don't know if there's a strong average. A lot of it is dependent. Like Andrea mentioned herself, there was like that kind of surprise of needing to engage another team, working with the tech team in order to update their privacy policy and their terms of service. And that's kind of the big thing is it's just dependent on how quickly you can make the changes to actually become compliant. And so I think that's probably the big delay is it's not actually on the processing times. I would say the processing times are relatively consistent and can keep you kind of like if you were fully compliant, getting approved probably in a month sounds like I would say is our average, but it's all of the time before that. That is taking the longest amount of time of getting compliant. And so, yeah, that's a lot of like back and forth about how do we need to change our terms and conditions? How do we need to change our privacy policy? So, if you can work with our team up front, where we see a lot of brands kind of struggle, is they'll try to submit. Or working with other providers where you might struggle is like you'll try to submit a terms of service or a privacy policy. You'll go into the queue directly to the carriers and you'll get denied because it's not compliant. And you actually have to go back to the end of the line. Whereas what we want to help our customers do is like start off on the right foot. We don't apply for you until we feel confident that you have all the compliance necessary to actually get approved. And so we'll work with you on that. And yeah, and I think that's kind of honestly the biggest like delay is just making sure that all of those compliance pieces are in place. So to some extent, it's about your team and how quickly you're able to get your teams like fully making the changes necessary to get compliant. So I would say that's the big blocker. And then from there, the processing times once you're fully compliant are like shrinking every day as they get more seamless. But yeah, I would say maybe it started like pretty variable previously, and now I would say they're getting close, like shorter and shorter, a month, even sometimes we've seen weeks to get approved. So as long as the compliance pieces are all there. So that's a great question. Okay, so we've got 10 minutes left. To wrap up here, would love to ask a couple of closing questions, Andrea. What's the most exciting development you're watching in mobile messaging right now?
I think this is probably one of the bigger things that we've seen. I definitely pay attention to my mar campaigns now that I receive on my phone. Like I said, I have a lot of unread text messages, but I do notice when people are transitioning over into RCS and they're actually having their logo on the messages that they're sending. They're identifying themselves. They're sending messages in a more consistent way that makes me feel like they know what I'm in their app or in their experience doing. So a lot of catered messages to like me specifically as a user on any of those platforms.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is it more personalization or do you find it like the timing of the message? Like, oh, this was exactly what I was doing, and therefore this message makes a lot of sense contextually? Or is it the fact that they've added that personalization in the message?
I think a little bit of both. I do think some of the personalization or like the timing of what I was doing to like getting a text messages freaks some people, self included. Like if I was looking at something and I receive like a, don't you want to check out with this item? But like it does make me feel seen in order to be like, I know that I was doing that one thing and like maybe I did drop off because I had to go chase a kid and maybe I can get back to it in a few minutes when I have more time. So, yes, both, but I think maybe um the personalization for me is a lot of it.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, what's the split of your messages that are coming in as RCS? Do you think would you consider yourself kind of early adopter given the volume of like branded messages that you're getting in, or yeah, where do you think the market is right now in terms of RCS adoption?
When I look at my again unread text, there's like maybe 5 companies that send messages that are RCS. Crate and Barrel is like one that sticks out to me. Like they're very branded. They have their logo, they have their name in the title, and most other ones are just coming from like that 5-digit number that, we see from almost every brand.
Yeah, they're still kind of I think you guys I agree. I think you guys are probably early adopters here. And that does really help cut through the noise right now is like the fact that everyone else is coming from like that short code and it does look like spam. Like why would I trust this random number? Especially also the card experience is just so different than getting a text with like a link in it that's very confusing. It does look like spam. Um, okay, so given that you guys are on the early adopter side, why do you think brands should start prepping for RCS now, jump on the bandwagon rather than waiting?
I do think that eventually it'll take over SMS. Like I think that most brands will move this way. Most brands will be able to identify themselves, especially with Apple adopting it now. I think that most um brands and people in general will be accustomed to seeing that eventually. And then the ones that are still messaging with like a 5 digit or even a toll-free number that's unbranded could just be marked as spam and like go into the spam folder. I know Apple does that specifically. Like if they don't know the message, they'll throw it into that folder. I think that that's eventually where we might move to.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Okay, one last question before we close out. Since branding has been so important, how did you think about the way to brand your senders? So, as part of the RCS sender, there's the logos and then there's also the sender name. How did you think about that branding? What was that process like for you guys?
I think when we look at our brand and we look at any brand really that we're comparing ourselves to, like what makes the most sense? What do people, we're, our logo, our slogan is built on trust. And so, what makes the most sense to our clients, who they know us as, what's instilling trust in our brand back to them with what they're going to recognize us as? And then that drove the conversations of how we would eventually um use that in an RCS message.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us and answering a bunch of our questions about RCS. Um, yes, keep an eye on the inbox and let me know if you have additional questions. We'll answer it. But yeah, thank you for being here and thank you so much for joining us, Andrea.
Thank you guys.